Hi, this is Steve with Thresher Media Group. Welcome to When You're Ready to Listen. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the truth about God, things you may not have understood, may not have been taught, or quite frankly, had a very hard time believing. And since our entire relationship with God rests on believing, it is important we learn how to separate the truth from the many lies and fictions that abound within the religion of Christianity. So when you're ready to listen, tune in and discover a pathway to freedom, encouragement, life, and hope. Episode 95, Revelation 12, verse 1. Revelation 12, Overview. A view of celestial events depicting Israel, Satan, the Messiah, the war in heaven, Satan being kicked out of heaven, mass persecution, and the demonic-fueled war on earth against Israel and the followers of Jesus. Revelation 12. A great sign was caused to be seen in heaven, a woman having chosen to be enclosed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was now being with child, and she now cries out, now being in labor, and now caused to being in pain to give birth. Then another sign was caused to be seen in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, now having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems. And his tail now sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven, and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, who now being ready to give birth, so that when she might give birth, he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is now about to now rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caused to be caught up to God and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she now has a place, having been caused to being prepared by God, so that there should now be nourished for 1,260 days. And there had chosen to be war in heaven. Michael and his angels battle. They wage war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels battled, or waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was cause to no longer be a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was caused to be thrown, the serpent of old, who is now caused to being called the devil, and Satan, who is now deceiving, or causing to roam astray, the whole world. He was caused to be thrown to the earth, and his angels were caused to be thrown with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven now saying, Now has chosen to come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren has been caused to be thrown, he who is now accusing them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their self unto death. For this reason, you are commanded to now be caused to rejoice, O heavens, and you who are now dwelling in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, now having great wrath, knowing that he now has only a short time. And when the dragon saw that he had been caused to be thrown to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male. And 2 wings of the great eagle were caused to be given to the woman, so that she might now choose to fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is now caused to be nourished or fattened for a time and times and half a time from the presence or the face of the serpent. And the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he may cause her to be swept away with the flood. And the earth helped the woman. And the earth opened its mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of his mouth. And the dragon was caused to be enraged with the woman, and went off to make war with the rest, or the remnant of her seed, who are now keeping the commandment of God, and are now holding to the testimony of Jesus. Wow. That was a lot, but don't worry, it gets worse. This chapter is beyond layered in time. It is multidimensional and does not follow a sequence of time. Rather, like pieces of a puzzle on a table that have been separated by color and identifying marks, yet with many pieces stacked upon one another, The Spirit gives us various pieces of this story that are connected for sure, but which are stacked upon one another and do not always have a sequential association with time. For most, this makes this chapter hard to grasp because we tend to love things that are orderly and sequential. We will do our best to order these images and events, but it is important to sit back and try to get a view of the overall picture of, or the theme associated with this chapter, which the individual pieces of this puzzle are revealing. For the most part, this chapter is focused on the devil, the dragon, Satan, and his contempt for Jesus and for all those who follow him. It also reveals his hatred for the nation or the people of the nation that produced the Messiah. But there is so much more. The Spirit takes us back to a time before the garden, when Satan caused 1/3 of the angels to follow him in his rebellion. And then the Spirit jumps us forward to the time when Jesus was born. And then he does a quick drive-by and touches on a believer's relationships or interactions with the dragon. Then he again jumps up to the time when the devil and his hosts of demons are cast out of the heavenlies and relegated to the earthly realms. And finally, to the time when the dragon will go to war against the two witnesses. It's a lot, and again, the pieces are stacked upon one another. Over these next two chapters, Revelation 12 and 13, we will also be introduced to a whole cast of characters that are up front and center throughout the remainder of the end times narrative. Number 1, a woman clothed with the sun. Number 2, a red dragon and his army of angels. Number 3, a male child. Number 4, the archangel Michael and his army of angels. Number 5, the offspring of the woman. Number 6, the beast which arises out of the sea. Number 7, the second beast which arises out of the earth. And the first 5 images are found in Revelation 12, and the last 3 in Revelation 13. The introduction of each character is not detailed in chronological format, but their stories and destinies are all intricately weaved together, and they reveal to us how the whole final epic of humanity is played out. I love the fact that there are 7 characters. It makes for a complete storyline. A woman, Revelation 12:1. A great sign was caused to be seen in heaven. A woman, having chosen to being clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head, a crown of 12 stars. Suddenly, within John's view, a great sign or wonder was caused to be seen in heaven. We are reminded that John is seeing what God wants him to see, and it is all from a heavenly perspective and not from an earthly perspective. Thus, these are pictures, and we must dive into the code and the codex to obtain our understanding. Why a woman? This is a composite image, and it is far too easy to get drawn towards the descriptions of the sun and the moon and the stars and run right over the fact that the central figure is a woman. Throughout the codex, when it comes to issues of spirituality, both good and bad, the Spirit often uses the image of a woman to convey his message. For instance, in Revelation, the called and chosen and faithful are referred to as the bride of Christ, a woman. At the same time, apostate religion is also pictured as a woman, the famed woman who rides the beast. This is the woman who seduces the kings of the earth and all those who dwell on the earth with her concoctions of religious and blasphemous libations. These two images of two prominent women connect us back to the book of Proverbs, where the Spirit contrasts practical and spiritual wisdom, imaged through a wise woman, with what would be the anti-wisdom of religious apostasy, imaged through a seductive harlot, another woman. The contrast of the wise woman of wisdom and the foolish woman of harlotry is a theme that runs throughout the book of Proverbs. It serves as a stern warning to avoid, at all costs, the harlot, the woman of religious apostasy. The Spirit uses this imagery because when it comes to humanity at large, men represent the glory of God, in that Adam was created in the image of God. But women represent the glory of mankind, the very soul, beauty, and splendor of mankind that is connected to the divine and to that which is spiritual, that part of humanity that is imbued with unfathomable power to delight or to destroy. We see this power expressed all across the religions of our world. By way of example, the Song of Solomon specifically zeroes in on this glory of mankind and describes for us how Jesus views his bride. In short, he is captivated by her beauty, and he is obsessed with her every movement. To him, she is altogether beautiful and without a single blemish. She is the most beautiful among women, and she makes his heart beat faster with just one small glance from her eyes. She is his perfect one who brings him unbelievable delight. It's a very powerful picture. This background should help us understand this imagery of a woman having chosen to being clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She represents the spiritual soul of humanity that is connected to that which is spiritual, all that is intended to connect us with Yahweh. Having chosen to being clothed. John sees a woman having chosen to being clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. This woman is presented to us and described with these astrological images. In Revelation 6, we address the meaning of these images, the sun, the moon, and stars. But we will review them once again. But first, let us focus upon the woman. The metaphors of the sun and the moon and the stars are derived from a prophetic dream which Joseph had when he was a boy. Joseph being the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. In this dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before Joseph. His father, Jacob, rebuked Joseph and said, "What do you mean? Will your mother, the moon, brothers, the stars, and I, the sun, actually come and bow before you?" Thankfully, the Spirit gave us the connection to each of these images, but let us keep in mind that the composite picture here is of the spiritual soul, or the glory of mankind, image through a woman that is adorned with these various astrological entities, each of which captures a different spiritual and ultimately a religious expression of her adornment. Since what is normally translated as clothe is rendered in the perfect middle participle, having chosen to being clothed, the Spirit is communicating to us that this woman made a choice in the past to be clothing herself with religion and spirituality. And in effect, that adornment still defines her. It still has a resonant impact on all of humanity. This is imaged for us in Genesis 3, in the Garden of Eden, when Eve was fascinated by the idea that she could be like God, knowing both good and evil. It seems Adam was content to leave the tree and its fruit alone and just otherwise be busy tending to the garden. But Eve did not have the same desires as Adam, nor did she make the same choice as Adam, despite being warned to leave the tree alone. Instead, she chose to be connected to the spiritual realm through the medium of a spiritual being, the deceptive serpent who spoke deceptive words. The Codex tells us that Eve was delighted by the tree. It was a delight to her eyes, which means that it stirred her soul. And she desired to obtain the spiritual wisdom offered by the tree. Eve decided that she wanted to identify with that which was spiritual and divine. And so she took of its fruit and ate from the forbidden tree. In so doing, her eyes were opened, just as the serpent said, and her eyes, the pathway to the soul, became the window, so to speak, to the spiritual realm of the knowledge of good and evil. Hence, the woman Eve established the typology of this woman having chosen to being clothed with the adornments of spirituality. By the way, Adam also ate the fruit of the tree after Eve, and his eyes were also open to the spiritual realm. But Adam ate for different reasons than Eve. We can infer from the role of the second Adam, Jesus Christ, that Adam's decision to eat was to ensure that he would not be separated from his wife, whom he loved. It was a sacrificial decision that would be followed up by the second Adam, who ate of sin and became sin on our behalf, on behalf of all humanity, so that he might redeem and perfect his wife, his bride, and not be separated from her. Accordingly, through his sacrifice, he now sees his woman without a single spot or blemish, and he will spend all eternity with her. Oddly enough, this image of the woman having chosen to be adorned with icons of spirituality and religion seems to communicate a very practical reality, which many of us should recognize. In virtually every society in our world, women tend to be the spiritual and religious connection in a home, a family, a community, in most churches. In fact, without their devotion and involvement, most of our religious institutions would simply fade away due to the practicality and survival orientation of men. Women continue to be the window, so to speak, to the spiritual realm of the knowledge of good and evil. Astrological images. In terms of her adornment, the sun, the moon, and the stars fascinate all of mankind as we gaze upon their beauty and their power, and so we study and explore them, all in an attempt to understand everything we can about these astrological phenomenon, which just so happen to be critical to our very survival. They are filled with mystery and have only disclosed to us, metaphorically speaking, bits and pieces of information surrounding their existence and purpose. And so, we remain obsessed. The sun, clothed with the sun. Going back to Joseph's dream, Jacob, the head of the family, is pictured as the sun that is clothing this woman of human spirituality. As we know, Jacob was the father of 12 sons, which formed the 12 tribes of Israel, Joseph included. When Jacob came to know Yahweh and identify with him in a personal manner, no longer through his father Isaac or his grandfather Abraham, God changed his name from Jacob to Israel. In fact, twice God visited Jacob to ensure that he knew of and accepted his new name. And when God repeats himself, he does not want us to miss the importance of his message. In the first encounter, Jacob is returning to the land of Canaan after having been gone for over 21 years. Jacob came to the ford, or the shallow part of the river Jabbok, which means Yahweh pours out or spreads out. He sent his family across the river and stayed for the night by himself on the other side. Then the story gets very interesting. We are told that a man wrestled with Jacob until daybreak. In the book of Hosea, we are told that this man was really the angel of Yahweh, God himself. When the angel of Yahweh saw that he had not prevailed over Jacob, he touched Jacob's thigh and threw his socket out of joint. Yes, God fights dirty, if necessary, to get what he wants. Even then, Jacob continued to wrestle with God. Clearly, Jacob was an extremely stubborn man and pretty dang tough. He would simply not relent to Yahweh. It's hard to imagine wrestling all night. I mean, just to put this in perspective, a high school wrestling match is 6 minutes, and those are the hardest and longest 6 minutes of a wrestler's life, even harder than all the practice put in to prepare for the match. But wrestling all night is an entirely different experience. Then the angel of Yahweh told Jacob to just let him go already, for the sun was coming up. But Jacob, who is still stubbornly fighting for something, said that he will not let go unless the angel of Yahweh blesses him. Jacob must have recognized something different about this, quote, man, that he would ask for a blessing. Genesis 32, verses 27 through 31. So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." He said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have prevailed with God and with men and have been able." Then Jacob asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob named that place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved." The Hebrew is fascinating and provides a unique play on words that unfortunately is often missed in our translations. The name Israel is a compound word comprised of the word Sarah, or Sarah, as we would spell it, and El. The literal translation of Sarah means to prevail, and El means God. Then the word Sarah is used again, which most Bibles translate as striven. You have striven or fought with God. But once again, it should be translated as prevail. Then at the end of the phrase in verse 29, the common translation use of prevailed and have prevailed is not accurate, for the word Sarah is not used, but yakal, which literally means was able. Your name shall no longer be Jacob, heel catcher or supplanter, but God prevails, for you prevail with God and with man, and you have been able. The idea is that this man Jacob was so stubborn and tough that he fought with God and with man, a throwback to his fights with his brother Esau and his father-in-law Laban. And he prevailed in that he would not, on his own, submit to their authority. He required something from each of them in exchange for his service or obedience. From his brother, he required the family birthright given to the firstborn son. From his father-in-law Laban, he required his daughter, which ended up being 2 daughters, and what became a significant portion of Laban's flock. All of these were acquired through trickery or behavior that is consistent with him being a supplanter. In like manner, from this, quote, man, he required a blessing before he would relent or submit to his demand to stop wrestling. But instead of taking what he wanted through some means of deception, he simply asked. Therefore, the angel of Yahweh gave Jacob a blessing, which is captured in his name change from Jacob to God Prevails, Israel. This change indicates that this man, who was by nature a supplanter, as depicted in his name, would now be a man who chose to let God prevail over him. And though he is fully able to keep up the fight, he chose to let God prevail over him. And although God could have prevailed by force, Jacob is the one who chose to relent to God and, in effect, allow him, God, to prevail over Jacob's life. After the drama of that event, Jacob returned to the land of Canaan, and he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which means God, the God of God Prevails. In so doing, he declared that God was not just the God of his forefathers, but now God was his God. And he began to identify himself with this new name, God Prevails. Thus, utilizing astrological imagery, Jacob, Israel, is pictured as the very center of mankind's religious and spiritual galaxy, so to speak. As such, this image of the sun, which clothes this woman, communicates 2 key principles. Number 1, we, mankind, are to choose to let God prevail over our stubborn and tenacious souls that would otherwise fight with God and never relent. Number 2, our choosing to let him prevail over our lives is the only way to shine with the light of Yahweh, the light of the sun. It is the only way to receive the blessing. Thus, those who are now believing Yahweh bear the name of Israel because they have chosen to be willing to let God prevail and be their only source of righteousness, their only source of light. It is like a woman who in a marriage ceremony finally says, I do. And in so doing, she comes to bear the name of her husband. This is the truth that Judaism was supposed to convey to the world. Judaism was established by Yahweh to be the light that shines in darkness, the source of light to the Gentiles. Through Israel, God prevails. Yahweh chose Judaism as the vehicle through which he would display his glory to the peoples of the world through the laws and instructions he gave to this one nation. And through the light of the world, Jesus would shine forth out of Judaism. Hence, through all this imagery, we can understand that Judaism as a picture of one who is willing to let God prevail over their stubborn and relentless heart of rebellion, is in effect the center of the spiritual galaxy that Yahweh created, providing light, warmth, wisdom, truth, and grace to all the world. The moon. And the moon under her feet. The moon, which is a lesser light in the heavens, would refer to Rachel, Jacob's wife and mother of Joseph, who was an Aramean. The Arameans were the ancestors to all other non-Jewish Semitic peoples, including the modern-day Arabs. They occupied the territory between the Tigris and the Euphrates River in what is modern-day Iraq and Syria. The Arameans were relatives of Abraham, all of which were descendants of Shem, the son of Noah. Thus today, the image of the moon would pick up the Palestinian Arabs and a large part of the Muslim world, again, all non-Jewish Semitic peoples. Hadad, Baal, and Astarte. The Arameans were polytheistic and worshipped many gods, including Hadad and Astarte. Hadad was also called Baal, and he was the storm and rain god with the power to determine fertility and the germination of all plant life. It was believed that the absence of Baal in the soul of a nation would cause dry spells, starvation, death, and chaos. Hadad was thought to be the son of a moon god. In ancient Egypt, he was known as the god Horus. In Greek culture, Hadad was equated to Zeus, and in Roman culture to Jupiter. For much of the Israelite history, Baal tried to supplant Yahweh as the God of Israel. Astarte was known as the god of sexuality and fertility, a great goddess who conceives but does not bear child. She was also famed as a goddess of war. Astarte goes by many familiar names in many cultures, such as Ishtar to those in Mesopotamia, the land of the Arameans, Ashtoreth, the queen of heaven, to the Canaanites and Sidonians, and ultimately to the Jews, Inanna to the Sumerians, Aphrodite to the Greeks, Venus to the Phoenicians, the Lady of Heaven to the Egyptians, and in more modern times, Mary, the Queen of Heaven. Both of these gods, Hadad, Baal, and Astarte, are often mentioned together throughout the Codex as they were frequently worshipped by the Jews. These two gods are part of those angelic glories that throughout time manifest themselves to humanity as gods. They are fallen angels, sons of God, who serve Yahweh in his heavenly council and are part of Lucifer's entourage of power and authority. We'll discuss them in more detail in Revelation 13 and 17. Given that background, in contrast to the light of the sun, the moon has no natural light and no natural warmth. This is because the moon is in effect a poser and only reflects the light of the sun. For those who abide in darkness, the moon provides an artificial sense of safety in the night, a way to navigate through the darkness. Yet, as Jesus says, "But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." With that said, it should not surprise us that the moon is only ever seen surrounded by, and often covered by, the darkness of night. For a few days each month, its light seems full, but for the most part, the light it reflects is incrementally reduced. Although the moon provides only an artificial source of light, as it is not a true source of light, the moon has a profound, necessary, and critical impact on the overall functioning of the Earth. It turns the tides, and it stabilizes the Earth's rotation. Thus, if the moon were to move from its gravity-fixed location, it would cause extreme and destructive climate change to the entirety of the planet. In this picture, the moon is under the woman's feet. This picture is a prophetic declaration of both the spiritual and physical reality. No matter how much it desires so, the moon and all it represents will never arise to the glory of the sun with which this woman is draped, nor to the glory of the crown which adorns her. The moon will never provide mankind with anything more than artificial light or a false sense of safety in the darkness. It bears no glory of its own, and it will never be able to provide warmth to the soul of humanity. Rather, its followers will know only the coldness of night. Moreover, the moon will always be submitted to the sun. It will always be found under its feet, so to speak. God has ordained it, and so it will be. With that said, God has established the moon and set it in place to serve its purpose. And it is necessary, critical to the overall functioning of life on the earth. Therefore, even if the various religions captured in this image of the moon desire to take the dominant position in the spiritual soul of humanity, so long as God provides the light of the sun, it will not happen. Even if the gravitational pull of the moon causes the seas to roar and tumult, producing fear and chaos throughout the earth, its effects will not prevail over the dominant effect of the sun. The spiritual soul of humanity at large will continue to be clothed with the sun, right up until the time of darkness, the time of night where there is no remaining light on the earth, the time immediately after the resurrection and rapture of the two witnesses. And it is for this reason, the time of night, when the moon will rule over mankind, that Jesus exhorts all of humanity in John 12, verse 35 through 36. For a little while the light now is among you. You are commanded to now walk while you now have the light, so that the darkness will not overtake you. He who is now walking in the darkness does not know where he now goes. While you now have the light, you are commanded to now believe in the light, so that you may now choose to become sons of light. This image of the moon represents the choice of humanity to supplant Yahweh, the true light, with demonic entities that manifest themselves to humanity as gods to be worshipped. These are those who provide a false sense of security to their followers and ultimately leave them surrounded in a darkness that consumes their souls and which comes to define their lives. The stars. And on her head a crown of 12 stars. As far as the stars, according to Joseph's dream, this image represents the offspring of Jacob, the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. And given our study on Ephraim, Manasseh, and Joseph, this would include the religion of the Gentiles and not just the Jews. All those among the nations who believe in Yahweh. Therefore, this picture would encompass all of Jacob's offspring, that which has been brought forth from the 12 stars, Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, and any other branch of religion and spirituality that has been spawned throughout time from these 12 stars. The 12 stars are imaged as a crown, or in the Greek, a stephanos. It's not a crown of royalty, that's a diadem, but a crown symbolizing victory. And this crown sits on the head of this woman, the head being code for authority, reason, and leadership. Thus, even over the stars, the moon will be a lesser light and will not obtain victory over or receive more glory than the stars which have come forth from spiritual Israel. This image communicates that when it comes to spirituality and humanity, the descendants of Jacob will have glory. They will shine like the stars of heaven, for they have been established over the authority, reason, and leadership of mankind. The prophet Daniel declares this truth when he said, "Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." By the way, as if we have learned, stars serve as a dual metaphor. In addition to the 12 tribes of Israel and its progeny, they also picture the angelic forces, some of which have been assigned to the churches. These stars are comprised of both good angels, those who dwell in the light of the sun, and bad angels, those who fell from the light of the sun and now abide in darkness. We'll see this division in Revelation 12, verse 4. Summary: the woman, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Consistently using the images of the sun, the moon, and the stars, as revealed to us in Joseph's dream, and with what will be revealed in Revelation 12, verses 4 through 5, we can conclude that this woman provides us a picture of the spiritual soul of humanity. Through this woman, Yahweh manifests his light, and depicts the spiritual structures and requisite authority of the spiritual hierarchy in the unseen realm, a realm that ultimately impacts the practical functioning of religions in our earthly realm. And that light, we are to understand that Elohe Israel, God, the God of God Prevails, is the very garment of light that cloaks this woman. Her authority and leadership amongst humanity are imaged through the 12 stars, depicting the various religious expressions of El Elohe Israel. And she will always have the moon, the false religions inspired by the demonic powers of light who are enveloped in darkness, under her feet. Through this woman, Israel, God Prevails, represented in a people, a nation, a religion. God has displayed his glory to the peoples of the world through the laws and instructions he gave to this one people group, and through the light of the world, Jesus, which shined forth out of Israel. In effect, Israel, the promise of God to be the God of God Prevails, is the center of the spiritual galaxy that Yahweh created, providing to all the world light, warmth, wisdom, truth, grace, mercy, and the very means of salvation. Let's stop here, and we'll pick up again in our next podcast and discuss the child which this woman bears. To get a free download of the full written transcript with all the scripture references footnoted, please go to threshermediagroup.com. That is THRESHER mediagroup.com. This is Steve with Thresher Media Group. When you're ready to listen, tune in.